It'll be great to see new trades coming in, so blade technicians, turbine technicians.
As BC looks to speed up approvals for renewable energy projects, we'll take you to a wind farm in the Okanagan, where power is already flowing. And
the most important thing to me is that we take an aging facility that's about to fall over and replace it with something that our community can continue to use for the next 50 years.
Putting a new pool to the people. Victoria residents will get to vote on whether to build a new city pool with a big price tag.
If we were to actually just plan a smaller pool, that would be so much easier.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. The owner and operator of an Abbotsford daycare has been charged with 6 counts of assaulting children. Police say the alleged incidents date back several years. The CBC's Saurabh Sandhu has details.
Abbotsford police say 60-year-old Indu Takhar was arrested on Tuesday and charged on 6 counts of assault. They say these alleged assaults took place at a daycare which Takhar owns and operates in Abbotsford. These incidents date back to 2022, but it was only last October that Abbotsford's major crime unit started investigating.
We did have somebody come forward to make a report to us, and then we had to follow up those allegations.
Police say the ages of the victims of the alleged assault range from 2 to 6, but they would not comment on the specifics, describing it only as assault level 1. That's the least serious type of assault and could include things like pushing, slapping, or face-to-face verbal threats.
I can't describe the assaults. Obviously, it's before the courts now, and it's very sensitive because it's involving children. She has been charged with assault.
Takhar is named as the owner of a 3-location daycare chain, Smile and Play Daycare, on the business's website. Police didn't say at which location these alleged assaults took place. They say police immediately contacted Fraser Health, and parents of the children going to the daycare were notified.
If there are anybody else that are out there that have information, or any other children that maybe attended the daycare that we are unaware of, to contact us if they have further information.
Fraser Health, which is responsible for licensing of daycare in the region, says it is conducting its own investigation and will be monitoring all 3 locations of Smile and Play Daycare to ensure they comply with the regulations. Police says Takhar has been released with several conditions, which include not attending any daycare facility or contacting any children under the age of 16. Saurabh Sandhu, CBC News, Abbotsford.
A Nanaimo woman convicted of murdering and dismembering her ex-boyfriend 5 years ago has now been sentenced in BC Supreme Court. Paris LaRoche was handed life in prison with no chance of parole for 12 years. A warning: this story contains graphic details. We get those from the CBC's Karen Larson.
It was a shocking crime with many disturbing details. In 2020, Paris LaRoche bludgeoned her ex-boyfriend Sidney Manty in the head with a hammer as he slept. When he didn't immediately die, she slit his throat with a hunting knife. Over the next months, LaRoche dismembered his body, disposing of it at various locations around Nanaimo. Last year, she was found guilty of second-degree murder and offering indignities to a human body. In handing down his decision, Justice Robin Baird said a mitigating factor was the physical and psychological violence LaRoche had suffered at the hands of Manty during their 6-year relationship, abuse that left LaRoche with symptoms of battered spouse syndrome. Manty's family reported him missing in 2020. Soon after, LaRoche was targeted in a police sting where she confessed to the crimes to 2 undercover officers. In a victim impact statement, Manty's mother called LaRoche, quote, "the evilest person I know." Karen Larson, CBC News, Vancouver.
Former BC United MLA Corinne Kirkpatrick is calling for party leader Kevin Falcon to resign.
More than ever, we need a capable center party, and he is getting in the way of that actually happening. And historically, I mean, who can imagine the leader of one party throwing his support and telling people to vote for a different party? He has no right to be the leader of BC United or the BC Liberals anymore.
Kirkpatrick argues that with Falcon still at the helm of the party, it will be unable to rebuild and repay its debt, which she says amounts to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Last August, Falcon withdrew BC United from the 2024 provincial election campaign, leaving candidates with the choice to run as independents or try to join the BC Conservatives. There are now 5 candidates announced for Vancouver's upcoming by-elections. 2 seats on council are up for grabs. The Green Party has now thrown its hat into the ring. As Chad Posthumous explains, the only party left unannounced is the one with the supermajority on council.
Thank you, Pete. Hi, everyone.
Annette Riley stepped up to the microphone and into the political spotlight in Vancouver, ready to try and win one of 2 council seats up for grabs.
As a mother, as a renter, as a filmmaker, as an advocate, I know firsthand the issues and the challenges facing our city right now. A lot of Vancouverites that I've been talking to have truly, they've lost confidence in this mayor and his council.
Riley may be the latest candidate announced, but not the first to go after Mayor Ken Sim and his ABC-led council. The April 5th by-election is seen by some as a referendum on their leadership.
I believe in a government that listens, a government that engages, and a government that acts with integrity. City Hall should be a place where decisions are made for the people, not for backroom interests.
Similar to sentiment shared by other candidates so far. One City's Lucy Maloney, Cope's Sean Orr, and the 2 candidates from Team for a Livable Vancouver, former councillor Colleen Hardwick and newcomer Theodore Abbott. And what about ABC? Mayor Ken Sim says the party is guiding the city to new heights and his council is united to keep going.
You know, I always say the role of mayor gets way too much credit. This is definitely a team sport.
Sim and ABC have been busy today announcing a first for Vancouver, building thousands of market rent apartments to generate revenue. The mayor isn't in a rush for the by-election, despite promising to run 2 candidates.
We still have 58 days before the by-election. An announcement will be coming soon.
Candidates must be declared by February 28th, with voters able to request a mail-in ballot starting on March 3rd. Advance voting is March 26th and April 1st. General voting day for the City of Vancouver's 2-seat by-election is April 5th. Chad Posthumous, CBC News, Vancouver.
People in Victoria have an important decision to make soon. They will be voting on the fate of the city's Crystal Pool and whether it's time for an upgrade. Catherine Marlowe has more on both sides of the long-standing debate.
Victoria's Crystal Pool is over 50 years old and needs to be replaced. It is the only public pool in the city of Victoria proper and gets 400,000 visits a year. City residents can also use other pools in the region, although one closed recently and another is expected to close in the next few years. Previous plans to build a new facility have been scrapped or stalled due to cost concerns, neighborhood opposition, and the pandemic. But now voters can weigh in on a new plan. The new pool would be 50 meters long, just like the current one. It would also have expanded recreation and fitness spaces, be fully accessible, and climate friendly. Construction costs have climbed significantly since the pandemic, so the city would need to borrow up to $168.9 million for the project. On Saturday, voters can say yes or no to the city borrowing the money. Campaigns have formed on both sides.
The most important thing to me is that we take an aging facility that's about to fall over and not function anymore and replace it with something that our community can continue to use for the next 50 years.
Because the existing pool is so old, it is getting harder to find replacement parts when things break down. It's possible it will fail completely before a new one is built. But some people say that's a risk worth taking to make sure the new pool is the right pool.
If we were to actually just plan a smaller pool, that would be so much easier. It would be so much simpler.
There's also a second non-binding question on the ballot about where in Central Park the new pool will go. The north location would mean tearing down the existing facility and building in its place. The south would go right beside it, where sports courts and a playground currently stand. If voters say yes and the city borrows the money, it could mean an average property tax increase of $240 a year for 20 years. Referendum day is this Saturday, February 8th. Catherine Marlowe, CBC News, Victoria.
He has returned. Darius Madavi is here with our look at the weather, and it just keeps staying cold, pal.
Yeah, Yeah, and the warnings reflect that, Dan. We've got Arctic outflow warnings up on inland sections of the north coast, as well as here around the Whistler, Pemberton area. We have an air quality statement up here along the BC-Alberta border, and then an extreme cold warning for Yoho Park and Kootenay Park. Now, with that being said, it's very cold, but we don't really have much in the way of precipitation, although Vancouver has just set a record for that cold. We've just had 3 days in a row where the high didn't reach above 0 degrees Celsius, or where the high was actually below 0. That is a record, ties the first place record for a stretch in February. So that, again, 3 days with the high was at or below 0, ties the record for that streak in February. Now, like I said, not much precipitation. We had some flurries pop up today. That's really the story over the next few days. The odd flurry might pop up on the south coast or on parts of the southern interior. You can see that here. There we go. Just a tiny little flurry. They actually covered more the last run of the model. So expect the possibility of flurries. But Dan, for the most part, we're calm and cold.
Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Now, while we're seeing a cold, snowy weather streak in BC now, other parts of the world broke heat records in January. The European Climate Agency says the month was, on average, fractionally warmer than last January.
We are seeing the impacts of climate change on extreme heat. We're seeing it on extreme rainfall. We're seeing it on sea level rise and storm surges if you're in a coastal area. We're seeing it in wildfire.
The biggest contributors to global warming are burning fossil fuels. Some parts of the Canadian Arctic saw January temperatures 30 degrees warmer than average. It marks the 18th month of the last 19 the world either hit or crossed that internationally agreed upon limit, 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial times. One of the country's largest nonprofits that helps with settling newcomers is opening a clinic. The Mosaic Community Clinic aims to provide culturally safe and trauma-informed primary care to underserved people. The CBC's Jessica Chung has more.
We're outside the Mosaic Community Clinic here in Burnaby. It's a new clinic aimed at providing culturally safe and trauma-informed primary care to underserved populations. And that includes newcomers, new mothers, Indigenous folks, those with complex mental health needs, and those experiencing homelessness or precarious housing. And we got to take a look inside before it officially opened.
When patients come in, when they first come in, they get their height and weight measured by the nurses. If a baby comes in, this is where we do that for them. This is our general examination room, and all of the rest of the rooms look exactly the same, and so it's standard with a bed and a sink and then supplies.
Patients will be able to access a wide range of services like routine checkups, immunizations, and women and children's health services. And the clinic has a team-based approach. And what that means is that there will be a range of healthcare professionals, including family physicians, nurse practitioners, social workers, lactation consultants, and registered nurses.
It will go beyond providing clinical treatment. It will leverage the resources and the services available in the communities and the community organizations in Burnaby to address some of the social determinants of health that might negatively impact health outcomes of our clients.
She says there are currently around 4,000 patients in Burnaby waiting to be matched to a primary care provider on the BC Health Connect registry, and that's just a fraction of the demand since not everyone is on the registry. Nastakova says Burnaby is one of the most diverse municipalities in BC. Over 50% of residents weren't born in Canada, and the clinic aims to provide unique care for newcomers.
Our staff in the clinic speak multiple languages, but also every newcomer who comes to the clinic will have access to free interpretation and translation services to make it more professional, also reduce the burden on relatives.
Overall, the clinic is hoping to accept 4,500 patients. Now, registration is open, and within the week, the BC Health Connect registry has already identified around 500 patients that meet the criteria of the clinic. Jessica Chung, CBC News, Burnaby.
9 new energy projects are set to be built in BC, promising to boost our power grid. That story is next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox. Canada's biggest night in music is coming to Vancouver, and we want you to be there. The Juno Awards will be hosted by BC's own Michael Bublé, live from Rogers Arena on Sunday, March 30th. The evening features live performances by Juno-nominated artists, including a special award presentation to rock band Sum 41. Tickets on sale now at cbcmusic.ca/Junos.
The Heiltsuk Nation on BC's Central Coast is voting on whether to adopt a written constitution.
It's been about 20 years in progress. It's not a new thing.
The nation says the historic referendum follows nearly 2 decades of development and consultation, including half a year of engagement with more than 2,000 Heiltsuk members in Bella Bella, Nanaimo, and here in Vancouver. If it's approved, it says the Constitution will help the nation, quote, reclaim its power. Wind power projects are blowing across Canada from east to west now. In BC alone, 9 new wind farms promise to boost the province's power grid by 8%. And the provincial government plans to speed up the permitting process for renewable energy projects. Radio-Canada's Camille Vernet takes us to a working wind farm to explain the challenges and opportunities people are seeing.
Near Highway 97, leading to the Okanagan, are towering wind turbines. Even on a calm day, their blades are spinning, generating power. Stephen Godkin is taking a closer look at the blades.
The blades look good, really good. Such a clear day, you can see like the whole surface of the blade.
Canadian Power operates 10 turbines in the region.
So the turbines are 100 metres high, and then the blades of the rotor are 47 metres.
At full strength, they can produce enough electricity to power 9,000 homes, and they spark many questions.
So one of the questions I get asked the most is, why aren't they always turning when we drive past? So because of the forecasting of the wind on this site, we tend to see a lot higher production at night. So when people are driving past at night, you know, it's dark, they're not able to see the turbines turning.
The BC government plans to expand wind energy, and fast. To do so is dropping the need for environmental assessment for 9 new projects.
These projects will generate nearly 5,000 gigawatt hours of electricity per year.
That's enough to power 500,000 homes, the same as the Site C Dam. This push for renewable energy contrasts sharply with US President Donald Trump's energy plans. He halted permits and loans for new wind projects on his first day in office.
Washington, D.C. seemed to be completely ignoring the ground evidence in those states that are run by Republican governments, and instead embraces very crude anti-renewable energy, pro-fossil fuel policy that misses the trend of the time that renewable energy is becoming cheaper and cheaper. It's actually more advantageous now than fossil fuel supplied electricity.
Still, Canada lags behind the US in wind energy production. Wind accounts for nearly 6% of Canada's electricity. In the US, it's closer to 10%. Fast-tracking projects in BC could cause concerns for nearby cities and towns.
We have to manage the potential NIMBYism that we see in communities. We have to look at locations that maybe not always ideal for the wind conditions, but contribute to the portfolio and are sufficiently far away from communities that could be impacted. So we need to find buy-in also through participation of communities.
But there is support from Indigenous communities. 8 of 9 projects will be majority owned by First Nations. The Saulteaux First Nations near Moberly Lake is one of them. In a statement, Chef Rudy Paquette says the wind project will create jobs and economic development while also respecting their treaty and making wise use of natural resources. Industry leaders say the projects are also an opportunity to attract skilled workers.
It'll be great to see new trades coming in, so blade technicians, turbine technicians. There's been a bit of a dearth of talent in those fields in BC.
The BC government hopes to have the 9 new projects spinning by 2031 as it tries to keep up with the growing demand for power and cut emissions. Camille Vernet, CBC News, outside West Kelowna.
The day that was in Deep Cove in North Vancouver. Quiet. Darius Madavi will bring us your BC-wide weather forecast after the break and some more details on the cold temperature streak. Stick around.
I think it's important to give a human face to the stories that we hear every day, the people that they affect. And I think talking to those people is what really gives us the true sense of the impact of the stories that we're hearing.
U.S. President Donald Trump's tariff threat continues to create worry and work at all levels of government. The Prime Minister met with the mayors of major Canadian cities today to discuss their role on Team Canada. As Kate McKenna reports, this comes a day after his latest tariff talk with the premiers.
The Prime Minister reiterated again today Canada's got a plan to stay resilient against Donald Trump's tariff threat.
We're doing more than just bracing ourselves.
He spoke to the mayors of Canada's big cities, who say they play an important role on Team Canada.
We are the engines of growth and innovation and opportunity. And at times, like these times of uncertainty, it is cities, not only the provinces and the federal government, but it is cities that must take action.
They're talking about diversifying trade and knocking down interprovincial trade barriers.
We're convening provincial and territorial leaders to do the vital work of breaking down the barriers that hamper interprovincial trade.
But the government won a 30-day tariff reprieve by promising to crack down on illegal drugs and migrants crossing the border, including a proposal to appoint a fentanyl czar sometime soon.
I see this person as a person building relationships with the United States, a person building relationships with Mexico, and I see this person as just a conduit where everything that's being done from a government, a federal government perspective, flows up to this person, who then is in a better position to brief the Prime Minister or Cabinet.
The fentanyl czar's role will be to help us integrate what is a whole of society challenge.
Some, including NDP leader Jagmeet Singh, question whether the border is what's really behind Trump's tariff threat.
What Trump, though, is really about, and it is very clear, he is about making Canada the 51st state. That is what he is about. He has made that very clear. We don't need to guess about what his intentions are. He has repeated it.
Canadian premiers are heading to Washington next week. They'll be meeting with American lawmakers and trying to convince them that tariffs are a bad idea. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Canada Post has laid off dozens of managers to try to save money after years of severe losses. No unionized workers were impacted by these job cuts, but as Brett Ruskin reports, talks to renegotiate their contracts are ongoing under what the Crown Corporation calls a critical financial situation.
These layoffs include 3 senior executives, including Canada Post's chief financial officer. Now, in addition to that, there was around 50 or so managers that were given their layoff notices this week. The majority of those layoffs coming in the Ottawa region, some in Toronto, some in Montreal, and some in other parts of the country as well. Now, a spokesperson for Canada Post saying this is part of a corporate-wide restructuring and that it's not going to affect any day-to-day operations at Canada Post, parcel delivery, letter delivery, things like that, because these positions were internal management roles. They continue on to say that they don't have an estimate yet as to how much money this will save for the Crown Corporation, but they do say that there will be no unionized positions affected by these layoffs. There was the strike that took place late last year from mid-November until around mid-December for about a month or so, with operations shut down. Since that time, union representatives for Canada Post as well as management for Canada Post have been attending government hearings. The latest update on those hearings, as they try to sort through negotiations, sort out a new contract for workers, is that we should have a report into that process by around May of this year. Brett Ruskin, CBC News, Halifax.
Donald Trump has now doubled down on his shocking proposal to take over the Gaza Strip. In a new social media post, he says the enclave would be turned over to the U.S. by Israel after fighting ends and Palestinians are relocated. As Sasha Petrusik reports, it looks like the Israeli government is getting ready to hit go on that plan.
There's a lot of excitement here over the way that the new U.S. administration and the Israeli government have been coordinating their interests. For instance, the Israeli government withdrew from the United Nations Human Rights Council. Israel has accused it of being anti-Israel, saying that Israel will no longer tolerate the Council's blatant anti-Semitism. This follows on the footsteps of the U.S. also pulling out from this same body just a few days ago. This came with criticism from the United Nations, from the UN Special Rapporteur for Palestinian rights, Francesca Albanese, who said it shows Israel's self-righteousness and that they just simply don't want to be accountable for their human rights transgressions. Now, the other issue, which the government here is in lockstep with Donald Trump, is this idea of emptying Gaza of Palestinians, 2 million people, afterwards handing Gaza over to the United States. The defense minister ordered the military to draw up plans for moving Gazans who want to voluntarily leave somewhere else, by air, by sea, by land. Many of the hardline settler parties here are also very excited. They have had plans to move into Gaza and to settle the territory themselves for some time. As far as the Gazans are concerned, they say they are not going anywhere.
He should know that we will not leave our country, and he should delete this idea of his mind out.
And of course, hanging over all of this is the question of the ceasefire. It is continuing. More hostages who were taken on October 7th, 2023 from Israel. More of those are supposed to be released this week. But this is a very fragile ceasefire, one that may not last long enough for all the hostages to be released. And in fact, the whole area may still go back to war in just a few weeks. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Jerusalem.
There is outrage in India's capital after the Trump administration deported more than 100 illegal migrants. The anger is not over the deportation itself, but the way it was done. But as Salima Shivji reports, the Indian government does not appear to be in a hurry to condemn it.
The fury was clear outside India's parliament. Members of the opposition party outraged that handcuffs and chains were used on Indian nationals forcibly returned to their country. The U.S. military plane was a first, even if deportations back to India are not new. More than 100 Indians living illegally in the United States abruptly sent back as part of U.S. President Donald Trump's immigration crackdown. An ordeal Harvinder Singh is struggling to recover from, one he says he wouldn't wish on anyone. Our hands and feet were cuffed, he says. They told us we were going to a detention center, but took us to the plane instead. Singh's family shocked to hear the shackles didn't come off until after the 40-hour journey back to Amritsar in northern India was over. Even the women were tied up, the deportees say. It was so harrowing, says Robin Handa. It's not the dream of a better life we were all looking for. The reports of mistreatment erupting into a political issue for the Modi government.
We have a legal obligation to admit them, to accept them in our country. But the manner in which it was done, in handcuffs, squeezed into a military aircraft, in such an abrupt manner, that is not acceptable.
New Delhi, keen to appease Trump on the immigration file, has repeatedly said it's open to taking back illegal migrants, a message the foreign minister repeated in Parliament, even as he promised a follow-up on how deportees are being treated.
We are, of course, engaging the U.S. government to ensure that the returning deportees are not mistreated in any manner during the flight.
But he says his focus is on cracking down on illegal migration, a key issue that threatens to derail the close India-U.S. ties that India desperately wants to preserve. Salima Shivji, CBC News, Mumbai.
An historic Oscar campaign upended. The star of Netflix's Emilia Perez has been forced to sit on the sidelines after a series of controversial tweets were found. We'll take you inside that controversy after this. While Donald Trump's 25% tariff threat on Canadian goods has been delayed for 30 days, it's still unclear where Canada-U.S. relations will go from here. Our two countries, though, have come back from a similar incident before. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon imposed a 10% across-the-board U.S. tariff. Here's what Prime Minister Pierre Trudeau had to say at the time.
I think it's very important that we don't panic in this case, and that we argue our case with the Americans, as Mr. Benson and Mr. Pepe have been doing, as the officials are doing, and find a solution which is in the spirit of international trading and not in the spirit of trade wars.
Fast forward about a half a century and we're in a similar place. The Angus Reid Institute says Canadians are responding with a boost in patriotism now. The number of people who say they're very proud of their country has risen from 34% to 44% compared to 2 months ago. The same percentage increase is seen in those who say they have a deep emotional attachment to Canada. For more on all of this, we're joined by Stuart Prest, political science lecturer at the University of BC. Stuart, always good to see you. First of all, do you see a pattern in how the 1971 tariffs came down and how Trump's threats are playing out now?
Well, I think there are definitely some similarities in the situation where then as now the United States was feeling economic pressure where it was losing some of its competitive edge relative to a world that was catching up. And in that case, the United States was in a more central position in the global order. It was the architect of the institutions of the post-war era at that point. The things like the World Bank and the IMF and the use of the dollar as a reserve currency and all that was starting to fall apart. Effectively, what we're seeing now is the tail end of that process where the United States is fully trying to disentangle itself from the world and really try to strike back and push back wherever and to as much as it feels like it can.
Of course, in 1971, we did not have a free trade agreement with the United States. What impact, is it still a relatively fair comparison then?
Well, I think it's an interesting comparison where we see the fallout from that incident and others like it was sort of a fork in the road for Canada, where there was an attempt to try to identify a third option, some kind of trading option that wasn't domestic, that wasn't the United States, that was looking to places like Europe for trade. And ultimately, that boomeranged back so that by the end of the 1980s, the idea of free trade with the United States had really triumphed and we entered into this ever deepening phase of the relationship. And now we seem to be back at that fork in the road where we have a choice between trying to placate the United States and try to build on that relationship, rebuild it, or once again strike out for a different direction.
The Angus Reid data we mentioned shows the potential tariff threat has increased patriotic feelings amongst those who were polled. What do you make of that response?
I think it is a sense that we are seeing a real rally around the flag moment here, where despite a kind of distancing among Canadians from a Canadian identity in recent years, we're seeing a resurgence of that patriotic belief. And I think it really does stem from the sense that Canadians do see value here, and seeing someone bully the country a little bit throws that value into sharper relief, and people are starting to remember what it is they really like about this place once it is perhaps in a little bit of peril.
All right. And lastly, quickly, where do you see Canada-U.S. relations going from here?
I mean, there are a lot of different directions here. We are in a moment of prolonged uncertainty. It's the unpredictability is the only thing we seem to be able to count on. So I hesitate to make strong predictions, but I think we are going to see a pattern of perhaps of threat and resolution, renewed threat and resolution, as we try to find ways to try to short circuit that process and look to rebuild a more insulated economy. But that's a short-term and a long-term process rolled into one. So it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Stuart Prest, political science lecturer at UBC. We always appreciate your time. Thanks again.
Always a pleasure. Thank you.
Darius Manavi is back with his BC-wide weather forecast, and this cold just keeps sticking around.
That's right. This Arctic ridge sitting over the province is remaining in place, and it means that we are cold and we are sunny and things are relatively calm. I know that some places saw some flurries this morning, including here on the lower mainland. That will continue to be the case over the next couple days, but for the most part, we're calm and cold. And so that's the big story. I'll talk a little bit about precipitation first. You'll notice that we may have a few flurries pop up. It'll be showers over the ocean, maybe on like the west coast of the island, maybe some showers right by the water, like right on the beach. But once you get even a little bit inland, it's going to be flurries. And it's the same story here in the lower mainland, where we may have a few flurries roll in at times, but for the most part, we're just going to be dry. Saturday seems like a pretty safe bet for at least a few, maybe inland, maybe on the North Shore, but for the most part, expect calm conditions. But that snow that's on the ground is going to stick around. We may also notice some snow breaking into the interior at times, so be ready for that. And also be watching out for those extreme cold warnings, which may be issued for some areas because temperatures are hovering right around where they've been over the next few days. But places like Whistler, inland sections of the North Coast are much colder than usual. Pretty much the entire south of the country, south of the province is colder than normal. The north is still cold for sure, but not too atypical for this time of year. But just expect those cold temperatures to linger, and with it, that snow that's already on the ground to linger as well. Here on the south coast, temperatures may get a little bit above freezing during the day. You can see +2, +3, +5, but then drop back below freezing at night, and that means icy roads may continue to be a threat over the next few days, so watch out for that as well. You'll notice those lows are definitely chilly over the next few days, but especially here on the south coast. Well, no, actually across BC, watch out for those wind chills up in the north that can drop temperatures, make them feel up to 10 to 15 degrees lower. That's a real risk of frostbite there. And here in Vancouver, it makes it a very uncomfortable negative double digits. Tomorrow morning, for instance, -12 is probably what it's going to feel like, so be ready for that. But like I said, lots of sunshine, a little bit of cloud, a few flurries in some places you'll notice, but for the most part, we are looking quite calm. And yeah, you can thank that Arctic ridge for that. And it's not really budging until maybe mid to late next week at the earliest, so expect more of these conditions to come. Like I said, feeling very cold tomorrow morning, but then those temperatures get up to a toasty +1. That's about 6 degrees below normal. Our lows are also quite a bit below seasonal, and watch out for those flurries tomorrow night. And that's it, Dan. It's getting cold again.
Staying cold.
Yeah.
Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
The film Emilia Perez is a top contender at next month's Academy Awards with 13 nominations, including Best Actress. Carla Sofia Gascon is the first openly trans person to receive an Oscar nod for acting. But suddenly all the buzz around her and the film is starting to sting. Eli Glasner explains why.
For months, Emilia Perez was an awards season sensation and serious Best Picture contender.
It has the most nominations at the Oscars. It had won so many critics' prizes leading up to the nominations. It seemed like the absolute movie to beat.
Are you English? Quite a feat for a Spanish-language musical about a trans woman. But now the old social media posts from Carla Sofia Gascon, the actor who stars as Emilia Perez, have surfaced. Canadian culture writer Sarah Haggie decided to dig into Gascon's social media history. What she found was disturbing and offensive. They date back to 2016, when Gascon's post included that Islam was, quote, a hotbed of infection for humanity, describing George Floyd as a drug addict swindler, and that she didn't understand the world war against Hitler. As reaction exploded, Gascon posted an apology, saying in part, "I am deeply sorry to those I have caused pain."
Well, how did we not know this until just a few days ago?
The CEO of this crisis management firm says Netflix should have done its homework.
It wasn't hidden. You know, any good Gen Z sleuth could have uncovered that.
As the situation snowballed, Gascon booked her own appearance on Spanish-language CNN, apologizing once again.
Mis más sinceras disculpas. Public relations is the opposite of crisis management, and she went on a PR campaign, and in doing so, I think sealed her own fate.
Now with Oscar voting approaching, Netflix is removing Gascon from the promotional campaign and awards appearances.
They're erasing the trans person from the trans film. It's a really horrible irony, in my opinion.
Academy Award producers are already pivoting, scrapping plans which would have seen actors celebrating the nominees, including Gascon, on stage. Eli Glasner, CBC News, Toronto.
A little primate making a big splash. Coming up, you'll meet a new baby silver leaf monkey at risk of becoming endangered.
It can be tough to blend in when you're young and awkward. Is there a reason you give me this part of it? Let alone bright orange.
Of course not. This is the 3-month-old baby silvered leaf monkey making its public debut at the Bronx Zoo in New York. The species of langurs are found in the wilds of Indonesia, Malaysia, and Brunei.
Over the next few months, the infant's coat will gradually change to silver gray. These monkeys mainly eat leaves, and habitat loss has been blamed for their population decline in the wild. Now, 4 months after she died in a car crash, BC teen singer Nell Smith's solo album will be released posthumously.
She's known for her collaboration with the Grammy award-winning rock band The Flaming Lips. Her parents say listening to the album was challenging so soon after her death.
Nell, she's one of those people that seemed to be good at everything. So she seemed to have a talent for all kinds of stuff. So when she was quite young, she decided she wanted to do triathlons. So she did triathlons and she'd win triathlons, and then the music thing came after that. But she did roller derby. She was really good at roller derby. She loved that as well. And she was one of those annoying kids that was just good at seemingly everything, except for a friend of ours reminded us she was terrible at ball sports.
Ball sport, yeah.
She was just awful at that. With regard to the music, she started doing a young person's music group in town here, where they'd learn songs and they'd perform them as a group. And it was really, when we went to the first performance, I remember, and I can't remember how old she would have been, like 8 or 9 maybe. And I remember it finishing and Rachel and I looking at each other and going, she's got a really good voice actually.
We got the test pressings a couple of weeks ago, and they just come as like a white album. There's no kind of writing or anything on them. And we got them and we were kind of excited, I think, to get them. But then we opened them and we just left them. We actually just suddenly brought up too much for us. We couldn't listen to them. And then it was Ike, a 13-year-old son, who just sort of said, can we listen to Nell's album? And so we put it on, and it was hard. It was really difficult to listen to. Yeah. But good, and I'm glad he made us do it. But it was really tough. And I haven't listened to it again. I don't know if you have. Well, no. But no.
No.
I know in time we'll be able to, and to have a voice is really special too. But it's a lot right now.
Everything was done and ready to go on the album. It was mixed and mastered, and on the day before she died, they managed to get this shoot together, and everything seemed to just come together. And she was happy, and she was motivated, and she was feisty, and they had a lot of fun shooting the video. Some of the B-roll footage that didn't get into the video is just really nice to have, and we feel blessed to have stuff like that, because I think a lot of people don't get that. I mean, I know we've all got thousands of photos on our phones now, which is different, and all these memories, but these kind of videos that Alex shot with her they're just beautiful. So she kind of did all of this stuff in the last kind of literally hours of her life, which I'm really happy that she got to do that as well.
That's lovely.
It's a great keepsake to have. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we'll have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.